The knock is sharp, urgent, louder than it needs to be. Police, the officer calls out again, his knuckles rapping against the front door as his partner shifts uneasily beside him. The house doesn't respond. No footsteps, no voices, no movement at all. The winter air feels heavier than it should, like it's pressing down on everyone standing there. A neighbor stands a few feet away, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "They never miss appointments," she says quietly. "Something's wrong." The officer steps back, jaw tightening. He doesn't argue. He already knows. "Force entry." The door splinters inward, the sound echoing through the quiet street. And the moment they step inside, the smell stops them cold. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's final. 8 people are already gone. This is how it ends for the Haight family. But this story doesn't begin here. Years earlier, the house still looked normal from the outside. Family photos line the walls, shoes by the door, toys scattered across the floor. The kind of home where laughter was supposed to live. But fear has a way of hiding in plain sight.
Please, you have to.
Macy remembers sitting in the police station, her hands shaking so badly she had to sit on them to keep them still. She stared at the table because looking up felt impossible. "He put his hands around my neck," she said, her voice barely above a whisper.
Please,
"I couldn't
you have to
breathe."
believe me.
The officer asked her to repeat it.
I didn't
She
do
did,
anything, I
louder this time.
swear.
Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "He choked me," she said. "My dad choked me." The room went quiet. "Has he done this before?" the officer asked. Macy nodded. "To my mom, a lot." That should have been the moment everything changed. It should have been the moment the system stepped in and said enough. Instead, the report was written. The interview ended. And when the door closed behind Macy, nothing happened. At home, Tasha tried to keep things calm. She learned how to read the silence, how to recognize the sound of Michael's footsteps when his mood shifted. She told herself she was protecting her children by staying quiet. One night, after the kids were asleep, she whispered to a friend on the phone,
You are.
"I don't want him arrested. I just want him to get help.
Right now.
I think he can change." Her friend paused. "Tasha, I'm scared for you." "I'll be okay,"
You have to get out of
Tasha
the
said,
house
forcing
right now.
confidence into her voice. "I just need to be careful." But careful was never going to be enough. When she finally filed for divorce, the tension inside the house became unbearable. Michael stopped pretending. His anger didn't explode. It simmered. And while no one was watching, he began preparing. Late at night, alone in front of his computer, his search history filled with questions no one should ever need answers to. Will neighbors hear gunshots? How fast do police respond to welfare checks? Where to aim for instant death? This wasn't desperation. This was calculation. And still, no alarms went off. On the other side of the country, the Harvey family had no reason to be afraid. It was New Year's Day. The house was quiet in the comfortable way that comes after celebration. Brian sat on the couch, Kathy moving through the kitchen, their daughters nearby. There was no history of violence, no police reports, no warnings buried in a system that failed to act. Just a locked door. And somewhere in Richmond, 2 men were driving through the cold, talking quietly, unaware or unconcerned, that by the end of the night, 2 families would be destroyed in ways no one could ever undo. One danger lived inside the home. The other was about to force its way in, and neither family would survive what came next. The night Michael decided to act, nothing about the house looked different from any other night. The lights were off. The children were asleep. The walls held their breath. He moved quietly, deliberately, as if he were afraid of waking someone who might stop him. In his mind, this had already happened. He had rehearsed it in silence, in searches, in thoughts no one could hear. Down the hall, Tasha stirred. She sensed him before she saw him. She always did. "Michael?" she whispered. There was no answer. She sat up, heart pounding, the way it had so many times before. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. She had learned that panic only made things worse. He didn't respond. His face was unreadable, empty in a way she had never seen. For a moment, she thought of the divorce papers, the police report, the hope that maybe, just maybe, this nightmare would end without bloodshed. She never finished the thought. By the time the house went silent again, There was no one left to hear it. Hours later, when officers stepped through the broken door, they moved slowly, carefully, calling out names they already knew would never answer. One of them swallowed hard and muttered, "Oh my God," under his breath. Outside, the neighbor began to cry. In Richmond, the Harveys were still alive. Brian heard the noise first, a sound that didn't belong, a scrape at the door. He frowned, setting his drink down. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Kathy shook her head. "Probably nothing." The knock came next. Loud, aggressive. Brian stood. "I'll check." He never made it back. The men forced their way inside with a violence that shattered the illusion of safety in seconds. Kathy screamed. One of the daughters tried to run. The house that had felt warm and familiar moments before became a trap. Later, one of the attackers would describe it flatly, as if reciting grocery items. No emotion, no hesitation. "We just wanted money," he said. "It went bad." Down in the basement, the Harveys were forced together. Brian tried to reason with them, his voice shaking. "Please," he said, "take whatever you want. Just don't hurt my family." The response was silence. When it was over, the men set fire to the house, believing flames would erase what they had done. They didn't stay to watch it burn. They never do. By the time firefighters arrived, smoke was pouring from the home. They forced their way inside, calling out, searching for survivors. One of them opened the basement door and stopped. There are moments that never leave first responders. This was one of them. News spread fast in both towns. In Utah, neighbors stood behind police tape, staring at the Haight family home, whispering to one another. "I just saw them last week," someone said. "They looked happy." In Virginia, the community gathered in disbelief. People hugged strangers. Parents pulled their children closer. A sense of safety had been ripped away. Detectives in Richmond faced a nightmare. The fire had destroyed evidence. There were no clear suspects, no immediate leads. One officer slammed his fist against a desk. "They walked in, killed a family, and vanished," he said. "We've got nothing." For days, nothing moved. Then a phone rang. A friend of one of the suspects hesitated before speaking, his voice low. "I don't know if this matters," he said, "but something about those guys doesn't sit right." It mattered. Police followed the lead, then another, and suddenly the pieces started to fit. When they arrested Ricky Gray and Ray Dandridge, there was no resistance. In the interrogation room, Gray leaned back in his chair, eyes flat. "You know why we're here," the detective said. Gray shrugged. "Yeah. Tell us what you did." He did, calmly, without remorse, as if the lives he had taken were already forgotten. Back in Utah, there would be no arrests, no trials, no confessions. Just unanswered questions and a haunting truth. The warnings had been there all along. 2 families, 2 paths, 1 outcome. And the silence afterward was just as loud. The days that followed felt unreal in both places, like time had cracked and everything was moving without meaning. In Utah, investigators pieced together a story that felt unbearable precisely because it was so clear. They sat in quiet rooms scrolling through reports, interviews, and digital records, each new detail tightening the knot in their stomachs. One officer stared at the screen, shaking his head slowly. "He planned this," he said aloud, even though no one had asked. "He planned all of it." Michael's search history read like a blueprint. Questions about firearms, about noise, about response times, about making sure no one survived to stop him. There was nothing impulsive here, no sudden break, just a slow, deliberate march toward annihilation that no one interrupted. A detective closed the laptop hard. "We knew," he said bitterly. "We knew years ago." The house was cleared, but it never really emptied. Tasha's voice lingered in every room, in every choice she'd made trying to keep her family alive. Friends replayed conversations over and over in their heads. "She told me she was scared," one said through tears. "She told me he'd choke her until she couldn't see straight. I told her to call the police. She said she already had." Macy's earlier words echoed everywhere now, heavy and cruel in hindsight. "He's going to kill us." She had said it, plainly, honestly, and the system had listened just long enough to write it down. Then it had looked away. In Richmond, the investigation moved fast once the suspects were in custody, but speed didn't make it easier. Detectives watched the interrogation footage again and again, unsettled by how little emotion flickered across Ricky Gray's face. "You killed a family," one officer said, leaning forward. "Children?" Gray met his eyes. "Yeah," he replied. "I know." No apology followed, no regret, just a shrug, like the weight of it meant nothing. At trial, Kathy Harvey's sister sat in the front row, gripping a photograph so tightly her knuckles turned white. She stared at the men who had destroyed her family, waiting for something, anything, that might explain how this could happen. Nothing came. When the guilty verdict was read, there was no relief. Justice didn't bring the Harveys back. It didn't erase the sound of the basement door closing or the fire that followed. It only marked an ending where no real ending existed. Years later, one of the killers would be executed. The other would spend his life behind bars. But the house on that street would always feel different. The neighbors would always remember the smoke, and the children would always be gone. As the stories unfolded side by side, the contrast became impossible to ignore. One family lived with danger every single day. They reported it. They asked for help. They waited for protection that never came. The other family had no warning at all, no chance to prepare, no way to see what was coming. Yet the ending was the same. Death didn't care whether it arrived slowly or suddenly. Communities tried to heal in the only ways they knew how. In Richmond, memorials appeared. Flowers, candles, handwritten notes pressed against a fence. People spoke Kathy and Brian's names out loud, refusing to let them become statistics. A small toy store connected to the family stayed open in their memory, a quiet act of defiance against forgetting. In Utah, the grief felt heavier, tangled with anger and guilt. People asked questions that had no safe answers. Why wasn't more done? Who should have stepped in? How many warnings are enough? Advocates spoke out, their voices sharper now. "Domestic violence isn't a private matter," one said at a vigil. "It's a public emergency, and when we treat it like something we can wait on, people die." The truth sat uncomfortably in the open. The system often depends on victims to save themselves, to be loud enough, persistent enough, brave enough. Tasha had been brave. Macy had been brave. It still wasn't enough. And that realization, that sometimes doing everything right still ends in tragedy, was the most frightening part of all. Hearts still raw, minds racing, both communities tried to grasp what had happened, to place it somewhere familiar, to make sense of the chaos. But sense was impossible. The Haight family in Utah, the Harvey family in Virginia, two names, two streets, two sets of lives, and yet the pattern was hauntingly similar. Warning ignored, safety assumed, tragedy inevitable. In Utah, detectives walked through the Haight family home one last time, taking photos, recording details, documenting everything that remained. It all seemed futile. The bedrooms were empty of life, yet full of memory. Toys, clothes, the remnants of everyday life. It was almost impossible to reconcile the innocence of these objects with the horror that had unfolded. A detective paused in front of Macy's bedroom, where drawings still hung on the wall. He whispered to himself, "She tried to tell us. She warned us." His words hung heavy in the air, unanswered. Meanwhile, across the country, Richmond's streets were quieter than usual. The community had become a collective witness to violence. Fear etched into every conversation. Families checked on one another, doors locked a little tighter, eyes scanning the corners of empty streets at night. Firefighters who had opened that basement door carried the memory with them, replaying the screams, the smoke, the stillness. It stayed with them, a shadow they could never leave behind. For the Harveys, closure came only in fragments. Courtroom verdicts offered the public justice, but to the family and friends it was meaningless. Ricky Gray's flat delivery during confession, the absence of emotion, had sent a shiver through everyone present. "We just did it," he said plainly. No remorse, no explanation beyond greed and planning. One could feel the emptiness of someone completely disconnected from humanity, and it chilled even the most hardened detectives. Ray Dandridge's demeanor was the same, calm, methodical, unflinching. It was impossible to reconcile their faces with the violent acts they carried out. Back in Utah, every person who had known Tasha and her children was left with a gnawing sense of guilt. Could they have done more? Could they have pushed harder, reported louder, demanded attention? Each memory of the Haight family was now paired with the haunting refrain, "We were warned, and we did nothing." Friends replayed conversations in their minds, imagining different answers, different interventions, different endings that never came. Both towns so far apart were bound by the same lessons. Life is fragile, danger is relentless, and too often the people who are supposed to protect us fail. The psychological weight of these realizations lingered in the air like smoke that refused to dissipate. Every person who had witnessed the aftermath, read the news, or listened to the stories carried a piece of the grief with them. Mothers whispered reassurances to their children, locking doors tighter. Neighbors watched each other more closely. Authorities were forced to reflect on procedures and protocols that had already proven insufficient. And yet the most tragic lesson was clear. Even when warnings are given, even when cries for help are loud and clear, it may not be enough. Michael Haight had planned meticulously, calculating every step, every outcome. The system's inaction allowed it to happen. The Harveys, entirely innocent of prior warning, fell victim to opportunistic violence that no one could have predicted. The outcomes were different in origin, identical in result. Life once taken cannot be restored, and grief cannot be mitigated by justice alone. Communities began memorializing the victims in their own ways. In Richmond, people left flowers, lit candles, placed photographs and small toys in honor of the family. Annual ceremonies were established to ensure that Kathy and Brian and their daughters would not be forgotten. In Utah, vigils were held, discussions were opened, and advocates used the tragedy to push for more robust domestic violence intervention protocols. The lessons were hard, painful, and sometimes ignored, but at least they were being told. Through the sorrow, the horror, the anger, a single truth emerged. Vigilance matters. Listening matters. Believing matters. Every whisper of fear, every report of abuse, every instinct that something is wrong must be taken seriously. Lives depend on it. Macy's voice, Tasha's hope, Brian's plea, they echoed together now across time and distance. A haunting testament to what can happen when warning signs are missed, when violence is underestimated, and when human lives are treated as optional. And so the story ends not with the perpetrators, not with the violence, but with the void left behind, the grief, the lessons, the haunting reminder that safety is fragile, that every voice matters, and that sometimes the true horror isn't in what happens. It's in what could have been prevented.